Welcome to my show, simply entitled Women Influencers, where you will find inspirational stories of successful women in male dominated industries. I am Veronica Malolos, CCIM, founder and CEO of the Capstack Group of Companies, providing commercial real estate development, brokerage, and property management services in the greater Orlando area. Today's guest is Tinna Jackson, award-winning executive coach, management consultant, best-selling author, and founder of Jackson Consulting Group out of Washington, D.C. You will take away some amazing nuggets from our conversation, so tune in. Please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe below. I welcome your comments, and please share with someone who can benefit from this podcast. Good morning, Tinna. How are you today?
I'm awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me today.
I know you're in Washington, D.C., and of course, the cherry blossom season just passed. I saw some pictures. It's so absolutely gorgeous. But anyway, we're here today, and I wanted to jump right in, if you don't mind. So,
Sure.
Tinna, tell us about how you grew up in your environment and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So yes, I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. I'm still here. This is where my business is. I'm actually the only daughter to to a Filipino mom and African-American dad who was stationed in the Marines when he met my mom.
In the
And
Philippines?
yes, in the Philippines.
Oh, how wonderful. And you know, I'm Filipino, so I'm just so thrilled to meet a Filipina like you. So awesome.
Yes, thank you so much. But I had four older brothers, so I'm the youngest of five, and four older brothers. And so, growing up here in DC in the 80s was not easy for sure. There were a lot of drugs here. And my dad was a little overly protective of me. And I can't, as an adult, I appreciate that so much more now, with crime rates and so forth. And so, because of that overprotection, I stayed inside a lot. I didn't go out much. I didn't go beyond the front porch at all. My friends would come over to visit me because I wasn't going outside much. Although I was not sheltered in any way. My parents talked to me a lot. I was allowed to watch television and all that. But I also started writing and becoming quite creative. I was always writing. My mom would always buy me educational games, and I would study those games so that when anyone would play me, I'd always win. So I was always studying. But then I was able to get special permission to go to a high school outside of my neighborhood, which was awesome. It was called the School Without Walls, which still exists today here in Washington. And it was set up like college preparatory
Mm.
classes. It was great. It was at the time on the campus of George Washington University.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Was that for high school?
For high school, yeah. So imagine the
Awesome.
exposure, getting away from the neighborhood, being with other kids who were a little different, a little quirky, a little nerdy, kind of being in my element. And that creative spark just kind of continued. Now, I delayed going to college because I was not sure what I wanted to do. Initially, I was going to go down the path of hairstyling. I went to cosmetology school. And after doing that in the early 90s, I actually got a job with a law firm that had a lobbying practice. So I meet this guy, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, Tina, I love your work ethic. I think you should consider coming to work with me on the Hill."
Mm.
And I'm like, I've got this beauty thing going. I might open a hair salon. Again, I said I might. I might open a hair salon, whatever. And he just kept asking me, like three times he asked me, and I said, "Okay, I'll consider it." And so he takes me to the Hill to a fundraising reception for the gentleman that he was going to work for. And when I met him, I was just like, "Okay, I think I could do this. I think I could do this." I also started to think that if someone recognizes your talent and makes an offer to you, it's worth considering.
No, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And luckily, I didn't allow my fear of the unknown at such a young age to get in the way. And so I decided to take the job. Why not? I'm young. I'll take the job. Well, I ended up in the Senate for 10 years.
Wow.
I started as executive assistant to the senator, and then I actually did some fundraising on the side, so I was able to get some PAC experience during that time, and I ended my career there as deputy chief of staff.
Wow. And let me ask you, so did you ever think about returning to college and getting a political science degree because of this? And by the way, I want to say I am so in awe of the fact that a young woman like you actually didn't say no to something that you had no idea what it was going to lead to.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
phenomenal.
Now, don't get me wrong, I almost did, but yes, I did. I went to college in between, so I was there for 10 years. And I remember being in a meeting and we were going around the round robin doing introductions for a particular meeting. And I was like, oh my God, these folks are so smart. I need to, not that I wanted to hang up the creative piece and the cosmetology piece. I was like, that's a natural talent of mine. I can
Hmm.
put that off to the side because if you're good, it doesn't matter if you're doing it 50 years from now, it's still going to come to you, right? And so I figured, let me put that to the side. Let me take my behind to school. And I did. And I got my degree while I was working in the Senate.
And
Yeah.
how did you actually move into owning your own business? I know you said you were there 10 years with
Hmm.
the senator as assistant
Yes.
or deputy chief of staff.
Yes.
And what
Yes.
did you do next?
So after that, I actually went to nonprofit world for a little bit. So I had two jobs, one with a nonprofit and one with a trade association. And after that, I kind of missed the political bug a little bit, and I ended up working for a political committee for 8 years. And
Mm,
during that time, I realized something really important. Something clicked in me and I started noticing patterns, right? Particularly in Washington and in politics, right? There's so many subject matter experts. It is easy to become a subject matter expert in politics because you just hone in, you learn, strategize. But the one thing that I noticed was missing was not only emotional intelligence, but training on management and leadership. And you
mm,
don't realize how important that is until you're the only one left and you have to manage a big project or you have to manage a group of people because someone else got a great opportunity. And so
mm.
you're kind of left holding this management bag. And it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do with all these people? Well, you got to manage them now. And I noticed that and I said, you know what? I need to fill this gap. I need to figure out how to fill this gap. So as I was continuing to work for this committee, I started my business and started consulting part-time during that time. And I knew it would turn into something because I saw the need. I saw that people always needed counsel, they always needed strategy, they always needed to know how to manage a particular situation when it comes to personnel issues.
Yeah, and truth be told, most CEOs or leaders of organizations actually lack in that, like you said, emotional intelligence and just the honing of the overall leadership style and
Mhm.
skill. And what
Mhm.
is the name of your consulting firm?
Jackson Consulting Group.
Yep, I see it in the back there. Absolutely amazing. And is it mostly for the political arena that you provide consulting?
No, it's not necessarily. I mean, I can tell you this. Every every environment is political. Anytime you have internal and external stakeholders, right, and you're having to make decisions, it can every environment can be a high stakes environment. But no, not necessarily the political environment, but it's easy for me because that's where I've thrived for so many years. But I also work with nonprofits and corporations too.
So let's talk a little bit about challenges,
Mhm.
Tina. Tell us about one challenge that comes to mind that you've overcome that you're most proud of.
Yeah, one challenge I'd say is back in 2020, during the very beginning of COVID, two brothers passed away.
Hmm.
And it was such an unusual circumstance. One passed away. And then on the day of that brother's funeral, we found out about a second brother passing away.
So
And
sorry to hear that.
so the grief was compounded. Um, and I've dealt with grief before. I lost my mom, I lost my dad, my grandmother. And so when you've had so many losses, you know what feeling to expect. And so this one was a lot harder, I think, because it's different when you lose a sibling, it's different when you lose your mom or dad, but there's this different kind of connection you have with a sibling,
Mm,
especially when they're brothers, because they were so protective of me.
mm.
They were always around when I needed them. So that was quite difficult. And it was hard for me to decide how soon do I go back to work, because it was two deaths back to back,
Oh,
two funerals, lots of planning. There wasn't much time to grieve, but I did decide to go back to work, and I decided to make sure that I was taking care of myself in the process. Like, I made sure that I gave myself grace. Like, it's okay to go back to work when you're ready. But for
mm,
me, I decided, if at any point I feel any grief and I need a moment, I'm going to take it,
mm.
because I've earned it. I'm still here. I earned
Yeah.
it. And so I'm very proud of that moment, because I could have just retreated. I could have just stayed home. But I decided not to. I heard my brother's voices going, "Get up, just go. Do what you need to do. Just go." And that's the kind of guys they were. They were always very supportive of me.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear about the back-to-back passing of your siblings. I grew up with four sisters. I know what it's like
Yeah.
to have such a close-knit
Hmm.
family, and especially a close relationship with siblings. And it must have been doubly hard as well because it
Hmm.
was during COVID, where we're all locked down, not being able to socialize, perhaps.
Hmm.
So, thank you for sharing that. I know that it must have been such a difficult time for you. And hopefully, people in our audience draw from that, that you need to just give yourself grace. I love that. I love that so much. When you make decisions that you feel you could be judged on,
Right.
um, it's thank you for sharing that. I'm going to
Absolutely.
ask you about influence.
Hmm.
If there was one outcome you're most proud of that you had an impact on, what would that be?
Yeah, it's probably convincing my CEO clients that they're not as important as they think they are. It's tough, right? You go throughout your career, you want to be at the top of the food chain. That's what people are striving for. People want to be promoted to their next levels. And when you become a CEO, it's easy to start thinking, I'm the boss. I'm going to walk into this organization and everyone's going to do what I say, and it's going to be great. That's not the case. You do have to build trust from the ground up, right? I think
Yeah.
the other part of that too is recognizing that you may have an agenda and it may be great. You may have great plans for an organization, but when people start to talk and you start peeling back the onion of the organization, you realize that you're uncovering problems that requires a serious amount of cleanup.
Mm,
And it's all on you as the CEO to figure
mhm.
out how you're going to, make these changes in stride and build trust in the process. So you're kind of building a bridge and walking across it at the same time, but hopefully a lot of leaders will take the staff with them and they can all build together.
Great. And was there maybe one example that you could sort of give us a picture of how it went from the self-awareness and the skill set
Mhm.
that you would advise, and how that actually resulted in a really great outcome?
Yeah, yeah, I do have one specific example. I recently engaged with a CEO, a nonprofit CEO, who, again, grand plans for the organization. But then quickly realized after about 30 days that there was a lot that needed to be fixed before moving on to this very advanced level
Mm,
of not only leadership, but strategic planning for the organization. And
mhm.
I recommended that we consider doing a retreat, get some alignment across the board with the leadership team and the mid level staff to figure out what issues really, really need to be tackled right now. It was a beautiful experience. It was great. Ton of work on me, but but it was really a great experience to watch people go from this cloudy, unclear state to finally getting to a level of clarity over a series of days, and then giving them a roadmap of how they could get things done as a team.
Yeah, and surely I think that people need to realize, at least the leaders need to realize, that they need to have a buy-in from their stakeholders,
Hmm.
because you may have a really grand plan, but if the people who are your support system or your support staff doesn't buy into that idea, they're not going to be able to operationalize it. So that's a terrific outcome. And has that been a resounding success, like long-term success? Was this recent?
Yeah, it was fairly recent. It was late last year, and they're in a great place right now.
That's amazing. Amazing, Tina. I wanted to ask you, if there was one piece of advice that you could give to our audience today, what would that be?
It's kind of two pieces, but but you mentioned self-awareness earlier. I can't tell you how much self-awareness is an incredible cheat code for how you build great relationships. A
Mm,
part of self-awareness is not only knowing how you react to things, and how you receive information, but it's also about regulating your emotions. Because if you truly care about the people that you're dealing with, you will check how you respond to them, right? If you want to continue building a great relationship, you would, make sure that you're responding in a more appropriate way, instead of, getting upset or, needing a breather.
yeah, and truly, I think there's a lot to be said
Mhm.
about being able to really recognize that at some point in your career, you would need somebody like Tina Jackson, who would be able to, no, really get you out of your own bubble and
Mhm.
be able to see things outside of your periphery. I mean, would you say that that was pretty much a statement that is
Yeah.
true for a lot of situations?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned the bubble. We talk about a bubble here in DC, right? Everyone in DC is in a bubble. You have no idea what's going on outside the beltway, inside the beltway bubble. Um, it is easy for people to get clouded and only focused on themselves, but
Mm,
not on themselves in terms of how they are perceived by other people. That's why feedback is so important. It's
mm.
important to have people around you that you will actually listen to, not yes people, not people that are just gonna, flatter you at every chance.
Yes, totally agree with you on that, Tina.
Mhm.
So we've actually come to the part of the interview where I get to pass on the mic to you and you get to ask me a question. So
Mhm.
please go ahead.
Absolutely. So I love this podcast. What made you start your podcast specifically for women influencers?
To be honest with you, at the time that I started this about 18 months ago,
Mhm.
I was thinking to myself, there's so many podcasts out there, and certainly the pod consumers
Mhm.
are really eating this all up, but
Mhm.
you really have very limited supply of sort of women focused podcasts. And
Mhm.
I've been an advocate for advancing women for, oh my gosh, for decades. And the reason for that is primarily because I am a minority woman, an
Mhm.
immigrant who moved from another country to the US.
Mhm.
And I personally have been through so many challenges that I think is worth sharing. And then I thought to myself, okay, so if I'm going to start a podcast, I believe that if I'm able to bring stories of successful women like you, and we build a good enough audience, that it would be certainly a benefit to so many to hear about stories of people like you who have been through so many challenges, have been raised in a very different environment as I have, and just makes for really, really great storytelling. So, the other reason, which is the primary reason, is because I have a 22-year-old daughter who a few years ago, before turning 18, she and her girlfriend actually had talked to me about what my plans were for my podcast. And and they mentioned that sometimes they would look on the internet and they really can't find anything inspirational. And
Mhm.
so those young women are kind of the focus of the start of why I chose this type of women's podcast. So thank you so much for that question. I love that you love this format, and certainly I believe that the audience is going to be so inspired by you. So before we go, Tina, and I want to thank you again for being here. Do you have any
Absolutely.
parting words?
I do. I've got to tell people, this is a really tough time for many people. Organizations are downsizing. People are struggling with figuring out what their purpose is in life, in their careers. I would just say, try to take it easy and give yourself grace. We all tend to overthink. Imposter syndrome creeps in on us quite frequently. Give yourself some grace. It's okay. Like, give yourself a breather. Take a mental health day. There's a lot going on, and it can be very stressful, especially it's for men and women. It's easy for
Yeah.
us to burn out just from overthinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, great words, great parting words, and I appreciate that. So, where do we find you? I know you have a book out,
Yes.
and tell us a little bit about how to find you.
Yes. So I am on Instagram at I am Tinna Jackson, and that's Tina with two N's, Tinna Jackson. Also on LinkedIn. I also have a website for the business for Jackson Consulting Group. It's tinajackson.com. And for the book, it's called the Power Play Journal. I have it here, the Power Play Journal, Battle Tested Strategies and Reflections for Impactful Leadership. And, I wrote the book to fill the void that I talked about earlier, to bridge the gap between employee performance and effective leadership. And the book is really for anyone. If you're struggling with managing projects, managing people, managing organizations, this book has journaling prompts at the end of each chapter, at the end of discussing each strategy. I think it's a cool book, and it's great. I think it's a great book.
That's wonderful, wonderful. And to all of you out there, pick up the book, and I'm sure that if it is something that would help you, that it would help you tremendously. So thank you again, Tina, for the time that you've spent with us today. I wish you all the very best, and I hope to cross paths with you again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.